I knew very little about Norse mythology. I grew up in Oklahoma, far from Europe, from Iceland. To be honest, I couldn't have told you exactly where Norse mythology originated. I moved to Florida because of my love for the ocean, something I didn't get any exposure to in the plains of Oklahoma. I liked the idea of the ocean. My childhood bedroom was decorated with surfing posters and model sailboats, despite not having experience in either surfing or sailing. But I grew up. I started a successful business, and before I knew it, I could afford to live out my dreams. I met Hannah while taking surfing lessons. We were both novices at the time. I still kind of am, but she stuck with it. We hit it off immediately. Similar goals, similar upbringing. We dated for only 5 months before we got married. There's moments in life where you can feel you're no longer swimming against the tide and, instead, swimming with it. Effortlessness. Following the natural flow. The love Hannah and I shared is not forced, and it never will be. We knew this right away. There was something in me that recognized Hannah when I first met her. Deep in my subconscious. How much lies within us so deeply, but is never revealed. Never strong enough to rise to the surface. Love is different. True love, I mean. It's powerful. It'll rise from the depths of your soul, grip your heart, and sing, "We're home." The woman chained to the stone floor claimed she was my mother. Although her face was unfamiliar, I knew her. "Balder, my son," she said, a weak smile curling the corners of her mouth. I'm sorry. I don't know your name," I apologized. "I am Frigg, your mother." "I don't remember." Her eyes swelled with tears. Her lips trembled. "What name do you go by now?" "Nate." "Your eyes are still the same, Nate." I stared at the feeble old woman. Time is not what aged her. Made her skin sag, her hair lose color, her voice weaken. She was drained, an empty vessel, once vibrant and strong. "Yours are too," I said. She allowed herself another tired smile. She looked past Loki, whose presence she seemed keen to ignore, and said to Hel, "Thank you for allowing him to return." Hel did not respond. "I don't understand what's going on," I said to Frigg. She turned her gaze to me. "You won't. Not fully. Not without Eden's apples." "Loki says she's with the one who awaits." Frigg's eyes narrowed at the mention of Loki. She briefly stole an angry glance at him, her first acknowledgement of his presence. "Do not trust Loki." Behind me, Loki sniggered. "Oh, Frigg. He is wicked." Frigg spoke forcefully, while glaring at him. "He tricked your own brother into killing you. You, Balder, the most beloved of all gods." "And look, he's back," Loki argued playfully. Frigg remained silent, fuming with a deep-seated rage she could not release. She's waited for it to settle, like stirred sediment sinking back to the bottom. She turned her focus to me. "You being here did not occur by chance." "My wife, Hannah, and I found the tower while sailing. We didn't seek it out." "Hannah," Frigg sounded pleased. You found each other then? I'm trying to get back to her. Yes. You two are inseparable. She died of a broken heart the first time. Wait, I knew her before? Are you sure? Frigg smiled. I suspect it is no coincidence that as Balder, you were married to Nanna, and as Nate, you are married to Hannah. I couldn't resist the slightest grin. Nanna. I really had known her name before, hadn't I? But what about my name, Nate? It wasn't similar to Balder in any way. In fact, my real name is Nathaniel, but I always thought it was too fancy, too outdated. I preferred Nate. Even my parents, who of course chose my name, have always called me Nate. Tell me, have you seen your father? Asked Frigg. My Norse knowledge was limited, but I knew that Odin was the father of Thor and Balder, and I remembered that Thor said the one-eyed man was his father. I have seen Odin, yes. How is he? Better than you, if I'm being honest. Frigg coughed out a laugh. Good. I let myself smile with her. When that faded, and a sense of hopelessness began to creep back in, I asked, what about my parents, Nate's parents? Frigg raised her eyebrows, waiting for me to continue. Were they Norse gods, too? Frigg looked past to Hel for the answer. I followed her gaze, as did Loki. Hel remained silent for a moment and then said, Hermod pleaded for your release, to bring you back to life as you were. I told him that all must feel a great sadness and weep for you, if I were to let you return. Hermod did not think it were possible to continue grieving if everyone knew that by doing so, you would live once again. So an agreement was made. You would not return as Balder, but instead be born into the world as a human, as would Nanna, and the gods would mourn from then on, with the knowledge that you were no longer a god, and that you would never remember yourself as such. It was as if I were both living and dead, a condemnation that I realized was, perhaps, a reflection of the half-decaying goddess herself. But what does that have to do with my parents? I asked. Hel made a noise that sounded like a sigh. They were not gods, but that is not to say that they were not influenced by such. I don't understand. And by his expression, neither did Loki. Hugin and Munin. They fly across the earth, as eyes and ears for Odin, and sometimes they are also messengers. Loki let out a frustrated laugh. Of course, those stupid ravens. Ravens. When I was a child, there were 2 ravens who showed up outside the house fairly often. They were curious birds. Despite them often being uninterested in the food I'd set out, they'd hang around regardless, just watching. They are thought and memory, continued Hel, and it appears that Odin is still able to influence the world outside this power, as he has done with you. His ravens planted seeds within your being, and that of your parents. For you, a passion would steer you to this tower, where you can once again become a god, and perhaps free the others. For your parents, guidance, to give you opportunities to learn and to grow, to shape you into a man worthy of being a god. Hel paused and looked at me for a moment, and they gave them something else as well, a name. Nathaniel. That is the name you've been given to fit human tradition. One called Nate is never just Nate, but to all you know, that is your name. Perhaps Odin found humor in naming you after the way in which you returned. I thought quietly for a moment, unsure quite what hell meant. It was Frigg who finally uttered the answer. Reincarnate. Hell nodded. I was speechless. It was as if my entire life had been designed for this moment. Odin, the one-eyed man in the rowboat, he knew so much more than he'd let on. Imprisoned in the tower, and without me even knowing he existed, he managed to guide me to this very point. He shaped who I am, and as a result, I could become who I once was. But first I had to find Eden. I turned to Loki. Take me to the bottom. His eyebrows flicked upwards, and he gave me a mischievous grin. As you wish. Suddenly, 2 stones on either side of the chamber shifted slightly, and water from the ocean outside began to spill into the room. What's going on? I panicked. Frigg swiveled nervously to see 2 fountains of water filling the chamber. You must make a decision, Loki said. Either go to the bottom and become a god once again, or save your dear mother from drowning. A death she will not return from. I looked at Frigg. I could not remember her as my mother, but I knew it in my heart to be true. I had a deep love for her that exceeded both time and space. Not even for Odin did I feel such a bond. She looked at me, hesitated a moment, then her jaw settled, and her expression became that of acceptance. Leave me. Frigg, I began. It is more important that you get to the bottom. I can't let you drown. I had only just met this woman, but my heart could not bear to leave her. The water was rising steadily. It was now to her waist, and almost to my knees. Become like a god again, Nate, she said, and waved me towards her. She pulled me close, and whispered into my ear the one and only thing that could kill Balder. If you can avoid it, you cannot be defeated, she said. I leaned back and looked into her eyes. I nodded. She smiled, the water now just under her chest. I'm sorry, I apologized. You are my son, she said, and I knew that meant more. The water was to her neck. She steadied herself, and in the blink of an eye was submerged. The water lifted Loki and I above her, rising toward the ceiling. Hel stood beneath the water as if it were dry land. She watched as Frigg surrendered herself to death. I looked to Loki. My hatred for him had grown in that brief time I'd known him to something primal. I wanted to tear his limbs apart, to make him suffer. But I needed him in order to get to the bottom. It was a bitter pill. How do we get to the next chamber? I asked, the water still rising. When the water reaches the ceiling, he will let us in. I looked upwards. Not much farther. Where's the entrance? Loki did not respond. He simply giggled as the water filled the last bit of space. I took a deep breath and went under. The stones shifted shut. The chamber was entirely full, not a single opening for air. To my right, Loki floated comfortably. Below me, Frigg was chained and lifeless. Hel was like a stone at the bottom, her long hair swaying in the water like thick black smoke. Then, I heard the beckoning whisper of the one who awaits. "Come to me." It pulsated through my blood and sent a sharp jolt into my head. He was near. The floor fell open, and we plummeted within the falling water to a dark abyss. A weightlessness accompanied the sinking sensation inside my stomach, further into darkness, and then impact. Submerged into something wet. I recognized it immediately. Thicker than water. Blood. I quickly swam to the surface and sucked in a breath. I could taste metal, smell the copper odor. The chamber was dark. The rising water had extinguished the flames in the chamber above, which was now an extension of the chamber we were currently in. I had a flash of panic. My sword! I gripped with my right hand, then quickly relaxed. I hadn't let go of it. After everything, I'd forgotten I was holding it. I did not know where to swim. I could not see anything. Then, as if on cue, hundreds of torches along the walls lit up. I could now see that this chamber was significantly wider than any of the previous ones. And on the far side of the chamber, there he was, waiting, upon his throne of blood and bone. I had reached the bottom.